Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. Welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads, episode 72. On this episode, join Jimmy Sengenberger as he'll break down last week's Justice Act debate. Also, he'll be bringing on Cassie Smedile later on in the show. Jimmy at the Crossroads, episode 72. Stay tuned.
And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends. Happy Monday and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style once again here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you on the show that's making sense out of nonsense every time we're on. At least doing our level best to do it. There's a lot of nonsense out there. And also bringing engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. Thanks for joining us in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Please, if you have not done so already, subscribe today, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads, right to the YouTube channel, Jimmy at the Crossroads on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Sang Center, Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And on Facebook, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro. Will take you right to Jimmy Sengenberger Media Personality. Also the website, jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Your place to go to join the Crossroads Club. Find great products on the shop and more, including accessing all our great content. JimmyAtTheCrossroads.com. And, of course, be sure to follow our friends at the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. So just a little bit, we will be joined by the Deputy Director of Communications for the Republican National Committee. Cassie Smedile will join us here once again on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Looking forward to talking with her about, gosh, there's so much going on. I don't even know where to start, but we will, when we start, figure out where we're going to start at. But first, last week there was a debate on the floor of the United States Senate as Senator Tim Scott, the black Republican senator from South Carolina, put forward legislation called the Justice Act. Now, some were accusing him of tokenism. He's the token black guy on the Republican side of the aisle in the Senate. Well, keep in mind, there are two black people, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, on the Democratic side of the aisle in the United States Senate. But they were saying, oh, he's a token. That's why he is leading the charge on the Justice Act, his own bill for police reform. But that's ridiculous. Tim Scott asked to take leadership of this bill, specifically because he has firsthand experience with these kinds of issues and feels passionately about it. The Democrats wouldn't allow the bill to move forward. 45 to 55. Rather, 55 to 45. It needed 60 votes in order to move forward procedurally for an actual debate on the bill itself and to take up that legislation, which could have been passed, theoretically, 51-49 after that point. The Democrats didn't let it get there, 55 to 45. Senator Tim Scott, you could tell that he really does care genuinely and passionately about this issue. And he is absolutely steamed, and rightfully so, that the Democrats refuse to even take up this legislation. In fact, in Cut 4, on the floor of the United States Senate last week, Senator Tim Scott rightly griped about how Democrats just said no.
Today, I lost a vote on a piece of legislation that would have led to systemic change in the relationship between the communities of color and the law enforcement community. We would have broken this concept in this nation that somehow, some way, you have to either be for law enforcement or for communities of color. That is a false binary choice. It's just not true. This legislation spoke to the important issues that have brought us here today. We wouldn't be here if it were not, as Senator Perdue alluded to, the death of yet another African-American man, George Floyd. His murder is why the country has given us the opportunity to lead. And my friends on the other side just said no. Not no to the legislation. They just said no. And why am I saying that they didn't just say no to the legislation? It's because along the way, I sat down with many of them and said, what do you need? And Senator Schumer sent a letter telling I believe it was Senator McConnell, there were 5 things in the legislation that needed to be improved. I said, let's give them the 5 amendments. I sat down with more senators, and they said, well, wait. There's not just 5, there's 20. I said, how about 20 amendments? And they walked out. You see, this process is not broken because of the legislation. This is a broken process beyond that one piece of legislation. It's one of the reasons why communities of color, young Americans of all colors, are losing faith in the institutions of authority and power in this nation. Because we're playing small ball. We're playing for those in the insulated chambers. We're playing for presidential politics. That's small ball.
That's small ball. I want to share some excerpts from Tim Scott's speech last week. We didn't get the chance to do so on this program because it really highlights what's going on in our political climate right now. As people across the country are clamoring for real change, he's trying to put forward a real discussion, get forward a bill, willing to work with the Democrats every step of the way. And not only was he getting pushback to the point of the bill not even being allowed to move forward, but he was being attacked and maligned in many cases for what he was trying to do. Let's go to cut 6 here. This is Senator Tim Scott, South Carolina, on the floor of the United States Senate last week, explaining what the Democrats' real problem with the Justice Act was.
I even said something that I didn't think I would say. I said, what about a manager's amendment? Let's just fix everything in one fell swoop. They said, no, thank you. So I find it disingenuous that people say, well, why don't you just sit down with one member and work it out? Well, if a manager's amendment won't do it, if the 5 amendments that they wrote in a letter saying that they needed to have these things fixed won't do it, if 20 amendments won't do it, you have an open process on the floor of the United States Senate that requires 60 votes to get off of the bill, then what, pray tell, is the problem? Well, I finally realized what the problem is, Mr. President. The actual problem is not what is being offered, it is who is offering it. It took me a long time to figure out the most obvious thing in the room. It's not the what. I've listened to the press conferences, I've read the newspapers. I'm not sure that anyone who's actually reporting on the bill has actually read the bill. Because the next time I see another story or editorial that says, we don't do this, their bill does that, and you put the two together, and it's not just off, it's just dead wrong. So I realized finally, it's the who that's offering this.
The who that's offering this. I've seen interviews with Senator Scott where he talks eloquently about the issues that, as he sees them, and how this Justice Act would have addressed those issues. And yet the Democrats wouldn't even allow it to move on to that step for debate. And he kept giving them offering after offering after offering. Basically what could have happened is this bill could pass the Senate, and then they could go to conference committee, I think, and work it out between the Republican-controlled Senate and the Democrat-controlled House. But the Democrats, as Senator Scott pointed out very ably in his speech on the Senate floor, the Democrats were insistent simply upon waiting, in essence, until the election. Here is, finally, cut 9, Senator Scott talking about the Democrat strategy here.
But instead of having a debate on that today and getting not 5 amendments, but 20 amendments, a manager's amendment, and instead of going forward and getting what you want now, they've decided to punt this ball until the election. You know why? Because they believe that the polls reflect a 15-point deficit on our side. Therefore, they can get the bill they want in November. All they have to do is win the election. and then roll in January, and they get a chance to write the police reform bill without our support at all. Well, this is what they did in the House, right? No amendments in the House for Republicans on their bill. We're saying amendments on our side. Democrats are saying no amendments in the House, but you here in the United States Senate, because we are the world's greatest deliberative body, you can have amendments. Not in the House, not under Speaker Pelosi, but under Leader McConnell, you get at least 20 amendments. And I thought, what the heck, I'll throw in the manager's amendment too. But that was not good enough, because the irony of the story is not the bill. The irony of the story is that today and through the rest of the June and all of July, what we're going to have here is, instead of getting 70% of what you wanted or more, you're going to get zero. How's that for a return? How's that for loyalty? How does that work for the little kid at home in North Charleston where Walter Scott got shot? How does that work around the country when, instead of getting 70% of what you wanted, today and tomorrow and next week you get zero? And you're going to wait until the election to get more. Okay.
Tremendous address on the floor of the United States Senate last week. Senator Tim Scott telling it exactly like it is. This is the agenda, clearly. They don't want to get a vote now, get something done quickly. It's all for show. We'll talk about that more with Cassie Smedile in a matter of moments here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, because it is abundantly clear, and it is unfortunate, to say the least, that they're simply playing politics with this issue. Senator Scott showing real leadership. We need more of it. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. We're going to take a break. We will be back in a matter of moments. Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hey, this is Frankie.
Hey, and I'm Angelo. We're the owners of F&A Pizzeria. If you're looking for the best pizza in town, remember us, F&A.
Hey, we got the best crust.
F&A.
We got the best cheese.
F&A.
We got the best sauce.
F&A, man.
Put it all together, what do you got?
F&A.
Yeah, you got that right. F&A.
F&A Pizza on the corner of Hell Yeah Avenue and Dan Strait Street.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Are you all right with being a shark maverick? Was it okay to team up with you?
I'm good, man. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Do you suffer from feelings of entitlement, self-righteousness, and arrogance? Fits of resentment, anger, and hypocrisy. Terror that the world is going to end, or even worse, that the world isn't going to end and that things are going to get better. A deep need to point fingers, deflect, or deny. Uncontrollable stress, frustration, or depression. Fear of recession, fear of no recession. Then you may have PTDS, or President Trump Derangement Syndrome. Fortunately, there's new Magatol, the proven cure for PTDS. Just one Magatol a day realigns your sensibilities by bypassing erratic brain signals to amplify the logic receptors. Talk to your Obamacare doctor today to see if Magatol is right for you. Recommended dose of reality is at least once daily. Warning snowflakes. Side effects of Magatol may include optimism, hope for the future, good feelings about your country, accepting economic prosperity, renewed faith in capitalism, and admitting that things aren't so bad under Trump. If you discover you are allergic to common sense, stop use immediately and contact your doctor. Relax. Breathe. It's Magotol. From the makers of Triggerol.
Hi, Jimmy. This is Bill Clinton calling your secret hotline here. I gotta keep it down because I'm calling from the doghouse here in Chappaqua, New York at our place. Don't even ask. All you need to know is she's on the warpath again. Oh boy. Hillary yelled at me for listening to you. I have to do it in secret. But I really admire your show. I really do. I'm calling to wish you the best. All the best. In the future and even right now. Oh, here she comes. Listen, I gotta go, but you got a great show, and you're gonna do very well in the future. I'll tell you that much. Oh my God, I know it's gonna happen. She's gonna have me read chapters of her book again. Put us both to sleep. I know what the title of her darn book should have been. Should have been called "How I Dropped the Ball on the 2-Yard Line with 3 seconds left in the Super Bowl." I gotta go.
Okay, welcome to the auditions for the official voice of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Name, please?
Kermit the Frog.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi-oh, Jimmy the show host here.
Next.
Next! I told you they wouldn't go for it, Froggy! Hiya!
And you are?
Stewie Griffin.
Can you sing a bumper song?
Oh, absolutely. La 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 la, la 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 la. This is so beneath me.
Thank you. Okay, next, previous experience in voice work.
I was a duck.
Next.
Affleck.
Okay, Dr. Evil, you're up.
Okay, everyone. Welcome to Jimmy at the frickin' Crossroads. We invite you to watch for $1 billion.
Mr. Simpson.
Wait.
Mr. Simpson.
Who's talking?
Mr. Simpson.
What?
Over here.
Oh, hey.
Let's hear the announcer voice.
I can't do an announcer voice. Oh, but I can do Mr. Burns. Announcer guy, eh? Excellent.
George W. Bush.
I'm here to auditionify for the announcerification process there for Jimmy Mushroomburger.
It's Sengenberger.
Jimmy In-N-Out Burger.
Next. And you are?
The name is Doc Brown.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Welcome back to the Crossroads.
I love your enthusiasm. When can you start?
Last year.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hey, this is Frankie.
Hey, and I'm Angelo. We're the owners of F&A Pizzeria. If you're looking for the best pizza in town, remember us, F&A.
Hey, we got the best crust.
F&A.
We got the best cheese.
F&A.
We got the best sauce.
F&A, man.
Put it all together, what do you got?
F&A.
Yeah, you got that right. F&A.
F&A Pizza on the corner of Hell Yeah Avenue and Damn Straight Street.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Are you all right with being a shark maverick? Was it okay to team up with you?
I'm good, man. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Do you suffer from feelings of entitlement, self-righteousness, and arrogance? Fits of resentment, anger, and hypocrisy? Terror that the world is going to end, or even worse, that the world isn't going to end and that things are going to get better? A deep need to point fingers, deflect, or deny? Uncontrollable stress, frustration, or depression? Fear of recession, fear of no recession? Then you may have PTDS, or President Trump Derangement Syndrome. Fortunately, there's new Magatol, the proven cure for PTDS. Just one Magatol a day realigns your sensibilities by bypassing erratic brain signals to amplify the logic receptors. Talk to your Obamacare doctor today to see if Magatol is right for you. Recommended dose of reality is at least once daily. Warning snowflakes. Side effects of Magatol may include optimism, hope for the future, good feelings about your country, accepting economic prosperity, renewed faith in capitalism, and admitting that things aren't so bad under Trump. If you discover you're allergic to common sense, stop use immediately and contact your doctor. Relax. Breathe. It's Magatol, from the makers of Triggerol.
Hi, Jimmy. This is Bill Clinton calling your secret hotline here. I gotta keep it down because I'm calling from the doghouse here in Chappaqua, New York, at our place. Don't even ask. All you need to know is she's on the warpath again. Oh, boy. Hillary yelled at me for listening to you. I have to do it in secret. But I really admire your show. I really do. I'm calling to wish you the best. All the best. In the future and even right now. Oh, here she comes. Listen, I gotta go, but you got a great show and you're gonna do very well in the future. I'll tell you that much. Oh, my God. I know it's gonna happen. She's gonna have me read chapters of her book again. Put us both to sleep. I know what the title of her darn book should have been. Should have been called How I Dropped the Ball on the 2-Yard Line with 3 seconds left in the Super Bowl. I gotta go.
Welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I am Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner on this Monday. Let's see, June 29th. We're just a couple days away from the start of July, and less than a week away from Independence Day, which is pretty crazy to think about. We're already there. Welcome to the show. Good to be with you. I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Please be sure to subscribe if you have not done so already to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Of course, follow me on Twitter at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And also on Facebook, Jimmy Sengenberger Media Personality. As well, follow our friends at the Washington Examiner at WashingtonExaminer.com on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, too. All right, so many different things going on in the world of politics. It makes your head spin sometimes when you think about all the news that's happening. Normally in a 2020 election cycle, we were thinking maybe we'd be focusing on the elections and what's going on with November, but a heck of a lot of news just constantly is breaking and coming out into the forefront. Let's try to do what we do here on this show, make sense out of nonsense, with Cassie Smedile, who is Deputy Communications Director for the Republican National Committee and joins us once again here on Jimmy at the Crossroads via the phone. Cassie, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Jimmy, great to be with you.
Good to have you on. So I don't know about you, but I think we're in a topsy-turvy world right now. In the last segment, we were playing clips of Senator Tim Scott's epic speech on the floor of the Senate last week, excoriating Democrats over how they handled the Justice Act. And I think that's just a prime example, sort of par for the course, of where we're at right now in political dynamics today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic speech. I'm so glad you're featuring it. I'm sure so many of your listeners have gone to watch it. But it's also, it's sad. It's sad because this was a real opportunity to get something done, an opportunity where there is real consensus from Americans across the country to say, sure, let's look at these things and let's put reforms in where they make sense. And then the Democrats were outed for just plain politics. They made it political, and too many communities are going to suffer as a result. And it's just unfortunate, and I think it's why people are so frustrated with our politics in our country, so frustrated with the Democrat Party in our country, and frankly why you're seeing that there's this silent majority that's growing every day of people who say, I cannot believe this is our country right now. We need more people who love our country and want to make it a more perfect union, and we got to get rid of these people who are just there to play politics.
So I want to play one clip for you from Senator Scott's speech last week. This is cut 8, where he talks about Pelosi's understanding sort of monopolies, and I think it was an interesting observation to hear the senator say on the Senate floor. Take a listen.
She knows something that we all know. She knows that she can say that because the Democrats have a monopoly on the black vote. And no matter the return on their loyalty, and I am telling you, the most loyal part of the Democrat construct are black communities. And no matter the loyalty of the people, the return they get will always continue to go down because in monopolies, you start devaluing your customer.
That's quite a way of putting it, Cassie Smedile.
Wow. Wow. And it's so true. And what we've seen with, first of all of our folks out in the States, and as you and I have discussed before, you know, we don't just parachute someone from Washington into a neighborhood a few months out from an election. We've got people in more than 20 states across the country who live there, and you're your neighbors and your friends and are representative of your community because your community's issues are their issues because we all live in there. And so we are seeing an enthusiasm like we've never seen before from Black Americans who say, that's right. I have only ever known the Democrat Party. That's the only politics that were ever discussed at my dinner table. Those are the only politicians I've ever seen come into my community. And yet they fail me over and over and over again, these representatives. And you have Donald Trump, remember, who famously remarked in 2016, what have you got to lose? And as we're seeing what's happening in our country, the looting and the rioting is very often disproportionately impacting Black and brown communities in our country. And I think that's what Tim Scott is saying. Look at who is your representative. Look at who's your mayor. Look at who's your governor. Look at who's your representative in Congress. And tell me if you think that person has done a good job representing you. And time again, you look at who those folks are, and they are Democrats who have taken for granted their constituents, who have taken for granted their voters. And this is another example, this bill, Tim Scott's police reform bill, that the Democrats played politics, would not even vote to proceed to debate the bill, let alone vote to pass it. This was, as a reminder last week, that was just to vote to debate it, to actually legislate, to do what we elected them to do. And they were too afraid that they would have to concede that a Republican had the right answer, that they weren't even willing to debate it because they, for them, it's all about politics. It's not about actually, as I said, making a more perfect union for our country.
Well, and that's exactly what Senator Scott was making the point of saying, is that, look, the Democrats passed their bill in the House. They wouldn't let one pass the Senate so that then they could hash out the issues and come to some sort of a compromise. And what's so striking, too, when you listen to that debate and discussion, it it's that you could hear how passionate Senator Scott was and why he wanted to take the lead in the United States Senate on this issue. And it was a half-hour speech, and he was able to break down all of these different points. But one thing that I think is so seminal, and I want to get your thoughts on what the Trump campaign is doing in terms of reaching out to minority communities, especially black and brown communities across the country in this 2020 election cycle. On Friday, I had a friend on, a former Marxist radical back in the 1960s, turned conservative and a Trump supporter. And he said back in 2012, he went to Ohio to work for Josh Mandel's campaign there. And he couldn't get the Republican Party and the campaigns there to make a concerted effort to reach out to minority communities. I heard similar complaints in 2012 during the Romney campaign here in Colorado, where I'm broadcasting from. But in 2016, that seemed to be very different, with President Trump, then candidate Trump, campaigning in states that many Republicans had in the past just written off, and it worked out well for him. And I think we're seeing that in 2020.
Absolutely, and not just in states, like getting right down to zip codes and street addresses and saying, I'll come in. I know that this has been a Democrat stronghold, but not just the president saying to our chairwoman, let's talk about this, Rhonda Mcdaniel, who's from the Detroit suburbs, and when she was the chair of the Michigan GOP, how she went down into Detroit and they went to the local party meetings to the extent that they existed and met with local community leaders, and they mostly just said, like, thanks for showing up. We just haven't seen a Republican in a while. You guys have totally ceded this to Democrats, and yet we're with you. We're entrepreneurial. We're pro-life. We are pro-family values. When we look at it on paper, we want to be Republicans. Just Republicans have never shown up. And that changed with Donald Trump. It should have changed a long time ago. But again, Donald Trump saying, what have you got to lose? And I'll go in and I'll help you too. And that has really been something that we've been able to carry through over the last almost 4 years as we've built our infrastructure with the Republican Party and all of the state GOPs, and of course with the president's campaign. I mean, one thing, COVID has sort of delayed this. We just announced them right before everything shut down, but we're doing these storefronts that are in urban areas. So our Black Voices for Trump team is really spearheading this, but we also are doing them in all sorts of other communities. I don't want to get ahead of their announcements, but they're coming back now that cities are opening back up again. But just being there and saying, this is my neighbor, this is somebody who grew up and knows our area because they grew up in our area, and they understand that we all care about getting the same pothole filled on our street. You know, it's all the same issues to us. It's not just some national level issue. And that makes a big difference. And because we know that the desire to support somebody new and different is there. It's just that the Republicans haven't been very good about sitting down and having the conversation. And that's changing. And that's going to be a big difference this November because voters and constituents know when their elected officials have failed them. And there's a lot of elected officials who have failed and taken for granted so many great Americans all across our country.
Once again, we're talking with Cassie Smedile, Deputy Communications Director for the Republican and National Committee. I want to go to cut one. This is the clip that Tim Scott was referring to in the cut we played a few minutes ago, Cassie. This is from, early last week when Nancy Pelosi made quite the accusation against Republicans.
Now, you've echoed your Democratic colleagues who have said that the Republican bill is, in their words and in your words, unsalvageable. When you were speaking yesterday, you said that Republicans are, quote, trying to get away with murder, actually, the murder of George Floyd. Senate Republicans are demanding an apology for that statement. Will you apologize?
Absolutely, positively not. The fact is, people say, I think you, frankly, in the press have given them far too much credit for a bill that does nothing. They're saying, well, you have your bill, they have theirs. Yeah, our bill does something, theirs does nothing.
Is Tim Scott working in good faith, I guess?
I'm sorry? Well, we would hope
Is Tim Scott working in good faith? Is this a good starting point?
I'm talking about Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell could open this up again and have an open Judiciary Committee consideration of a bill where they could come together and get something done.
Now, I want to contrast that with something Pelosi said yesterday on ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos in a moment, but I would be remiss if I didn't get your reaction to that comment, because I think it says quite a lot about where she's coming from in this political climate that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, the political pandering is really at an all-time high on the left, if that's the right way to describe it. And again, to say that we're not even willing to start, actually, I believe it was Senator Scott's office who put out a video where they did a side-by-side of his bill and the House bill. And some of the language looks like it was copied and pasted. This is a political talking point for them because they are so afraid to lose their, as he put it, their monopoly on a voting block. They are so afraid. And the problem is that their luck in this has run out because voters are smarter than this. Seeing the results, feeling the results in communities across America and seeing, oh, Donald Trump and Republicans are the ones who actually followed through on that promise, not these Democrats. The Democrats, it's incredible that they are so afraid of a debate because they don't want to give any seeming victory to Republicans, and yet it's a victory for our country. I keep saying it, but if we're all supposed to be striving towards a more perfect union, for average everyday Americans who are out doing our jobs and not caught up in the ivory tower of the U.S. Capitol building, it's not a partisan issue. None of this is partisan. This is about our communities and our families and safety. And I think they see right through it. But this is really, I think, a new low even for Nancy Pelosi and even Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, not even willing to have a debate.
Let's go to cut 2 now from Nancy Pelosi. This is just yesterday where she talks about what the Democrats' bill would have done. See, Republicans were covering up for George Floyd's murder, but Democrats are really trying hard to bring some sort of a real change that would prevent things from going haywire. So this is cut 2, Nancy Pelosi.
I think George Floyd's murder would have been prevented if our bill that we have now is were the law of the land. And that's what we're talking about, is how we go forward. You know, I don't have any, I have no, no, I do not, I do not, I do not. I'm telling you, we're talking about something that is an incident that everybody saw, the martyrdom. Everybody saw 8 minutes, 46 seconds of a knee on the neck. That should, and then they come up with a bill that says, or the president comes out with his whatever it is, saying, no chokeholds, but maybe some. Yeah, no, I have no, absolutely not. We are talking right now, the administration in terms of their denial, their delay on the coronavirus caused death. Add that to your bill of particulars.
Okay, so that was actually a press conference on Friday. But, I mean, the way in which she framed that is so interesting, especially when you think about what Tim Scott was saying on the Senate floor about how the Democrats' bill approaches chokeholds versus his. I mean, they can't forbid, they cannot ban because of the Constitution chokeholds at a local level. But, of course, democratically controlled cities certainly could ban chokeholds in those municipalities.
Right.
But what they can do is either ban it for federal agents and or put restrictions, strings attached on federal funds, which is what both of these bills do. But what do you make of what Pelosi said there?
Oh, don't go inserting the Constitution here. That gets in the way of Democrat arguments
I retract
all the
my
time.
statement.
They don't like it when people start talking about our Constitution. But that's absolutely right. Again, this is just her latest excuse for why they're not going to do anything. But what's so interesting to me is that they're not willing to move on a bill which could prevent deaths in the future. But they're also not willing to denounce the riots and the looting that have devastated so many communities. Again, going back to our earlier conversation, these urban communities, largely predominantly populated by black and brown Americans, and they're not willing to denounce those. Still haven't heard anything from Joe Biden in his basement on that. And then she tries to lace in their coronavirus. Okay, so we can have rioting in the street, and we're in fact going to join all of these protests during coronavirus, but then it's not okay when businesses want to open and people want to gather together safely with masks and using all the precautions. They can't have it both ways. And it's getting real frustrating if people aren't already at their limit of frustration to Americans. Again, people who are trying to safely but live productive lives and contribute to our communities and to our economy. And yet you have Democrats out there every day literally putting their thumb on the poll of what they think might help them in November. And, you know, these issues aren't partisan issues for the vast majority of Americans. These issues are just helping us live better, safer, more productive lives. And yet all Democrats can think about is how they can have their next fight with Donald Trump. And what they fail to see is that for many millions of us, it's not all about Donald Trump versus the Democrats. It's really about who's going to be out there fighting for us to help us lead safer, more productive lives. And by that account, if you want to have that fight, that will always be Donald Trump and Republicans based on how Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have completely acquiesced to Ocasio-Cortez and the squad and gone as far left as they possibly can go on every single issue, refusing, again, to even have a debate.
Sure. Just a few minutes left with our guest, Cassie Smedile, Republican National Committee's Deputy Communications Director. One thing that came out over the weekend, the New York Times put out this report that claimed that the Taliban had been paid bounties by Russians in order to go kill Americans, and that President Trump had been notified of this or something to that extent. And then the Trump White House and President Trump himself disputed this notion, particularly saying that the intelligence community didn't believe that this intelligence was verifiable enough to get up to the level of providing it to the President of the United States. Nancy Pelosi in Cut 3 sounded off on this. Let's take a listen to Speaker Pelosi yesterday on ABC This Week.
You're a member of that so-called Gang of Eight that gets intelligence. Were you aware of these reports?
No, and we have called for a report to the Congress on this. This is as bad as it gets. And yet the president will not confront the Russians on this score, denies being briefed, whether he is or not. His administration knows, and our allies some of our allies who will work with us in Afghanistan have been briefed and accept this report. Just as I've said to the president, with him, all roads lead to Putin. I don't know what the Russians have on the president, politically, personally, financially, or whatever it is, but he wants to ignore, he wants to bring them back into the G8 despite the annexation of Crimea and the invasion of Ukraine, despite what they yielded to him in Syria, despite his intervention into our election, which is well documented by our intelligence community, and despite now possibly this allegation, which we should have been briefed on.
All roads lead to Putin. Before you respond to that, because they're back on Russia, Cassie Smedile, I want to read a quote from Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe. He said yesterday, quote, "I have confirmed that neither the president nor the vice president were ever briefed on any intelligence alleged by the New York Times in its reporting yesterday. The White House statement addressing this issue earlier today, which denied such a briefing occurred, was accurate. The New York Times reporting and all other subsequent news reports about such an alleged briefing are inaccurate." Cassie, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I'm old enough to remember when, I believe it was Mitt Romney who said, Russia is a threat to us, and Barack Obama said the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back. The Democrats have never taken Russia seriously. President Trump not only put sanctions on them, he ousted their diplomats from our country. He has been one of the toughest presidents in modern history on Russia. I also would like to note that I'm old enough to remember when the Democrats completely gutted our military and put our defense on the back burner, and President Trump brought it back and restored it. So there's no disputing who has taken Russia more seriously and who also is a more fierce defender of having a strong defense and of our military. And so while there is broad agreement from the president himself, and I've heard senators saying this too, yes, this is something you're going to look into, but this is not what the New York Times is trying to make this out to be. And certainly Nancy Pelosi and Democrats have no leg to stand on when it comes to Russia, Russia, Russia. Again, for them, this is just a political talking point. It's something that they have no desire to, they have not had a strong desire to take seriously.
One of the important points here is that, look, the New York Times story cited anonymous sources, of course, especially for sensitive intelligence matters, but also was something where it seems like they didn't try hard to get the Trump administration to actually respond to this before they went and published it, and then President Trump's like, I didn't know anything about it, and it appears that that was exactly the case. He didn't know anything about it, and as it's been presented, it's the reason why he wasn't notified is because the intel hadn't been verified. At least that's what I understand.
Right. Right. And who are you going to believe? The New York Times or our intel community and people who prepare the daily intelligence briefing for the president? It's just another instance of who are you fighting for? It seems like we have a lot of people out here right now, both in our media and in the Democrat Party, who aren't so interested in seeing America succeed at the moment from all of the issues that we've discussed today. And we want to, I keep saying I'm a broken record, a more perfect union, but also, we want our community and our country to be safe and secure. And certainly we want the best for our men and women in uniform. And there's no doubt that our president and Republicans fight every single day for that. And how unfortunate that they don't have partners in Congress and in the Democrat Party, be it Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or anybody part of the progressive far left squad, to help them in that effort.
Final question for you, Cassie Smedile, on the coronavirus. We are seeing reopenings sort of rolling back in Texas, for example, as we see a spike in coronavirus cases and in more positive tests as well in some of these locations around the country. And Democrats are obviously, they're making the claim that this is a failure in leadership on the part of President Trump specifically, that it falls right at his feet. How do you assess what we're seeing right now when it comes to the growing number of cases and testing, by the way, when it comes to coronavirus?
Yeah, well, I think by and large you've got the compare and contrast of people who want to empower you, empower businesses, empower Americans to be smart and to be safe and figure out how to work through this crisis. And that's the leadership you're seeing from the top with President Trump and what he's empowering governors and mayors to do locally. And then you see people who are enjoying power over you. And that's today's Democrat Party. If they can make this a negative talking point for the election versus trying to figure out ways to get through this, again, as a country and in our communities. I was actually just in Florida this weekend when they did the rollback to closing of the bars. People were very understanding. People did what you need to do. If you requested to wear a mask, people complied with that request. At the local level is where we're going to see this pandemic mitigated. The president has empowered the states, given the regulation or given the recommended guidelines from the CDC, but ultimately has said this is going to be up to each state because it's different in Florida and Texas than it is in Wyoming and Montana, or certainly New York and California. And so as much as the Democrats, again, want to make this something about the White House, it's just not the case. And that's all a good lesson for all of us in the federalist system. But I think that local municipalities are doing what they need to do to keep their constituents safe. But we also need to make sure that we're allowing businesses, we're empowering them to get through this as well, because I think there's no appetite for these lockdowns anymore.
Oh, no.
And yeah, right. And so as you do, again, look towards November and who you're going to vote for, look for who's empowering you. And look for who's just trying to have control over you.
One thing as far as the lockdowns, I mean, there were so many negative consequences to these lockdowns that the idea that you can actually go back to them, I think would do far, far more untold damage to America. And I just don't see it being tenable in the first place, especially when you had all sorts of protests across the country in the last several weeks that seemed to open the door to the idea that you can actually go ahead and gather together if you so choose, at least in certain Democratic-proof circumstances.
Yeah. Right, and interesting. None of those produced any spike in COVID. No, sir. Only if you wanted to go to a bar or business, you're the one who's the reason for the spike in COVID. I think the American people are onto it. American people are on to this talking point that the media and the Democrat Party has gone with. We're not buying it. We know that we can do this safely. We know that we can do it in a way that makes our patrons and our neighbors feel safe and is compassionate towards our neighbor. But we do not need to do it in a way that gives more control of our lives to government and elected officials. That's a big lesson for all of us here. I think a whole bunch of people have read the Federalist papers in recent months to say, now, wait a minute, what happened to states' rights? But Democrats would have you all believe it should all be federal all the time, right?
Well, actually, there was one instance where the Democrats actually acknowledged the existence of the 10th Amendment, and that was when President Trump talked about how he would like to encourage states to reopen churches. Then suddenly you saw Twitter was all about, oh my gosh, there's something called the 10th Amendment that would get in the way, President Trump. That's the one time I've seen them highlight that, but we got to leave it there. Cassie Smedile, Deputy Director of Communications for the Republican National Committee. Always great to check in with you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you. You as well. Once again, Cassie Smedile with the Republican National Committee joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. And we are going to leave it there today. But here's what's coming up in the next couple of days. Tomorrow, Rashini Rajkumar will be rejoining us. She just, as I understand it, had an interview yesterday with the police chief of the Minneapolis Police Department. I want to get a little bit of detail as to what their conversation was about, some of the specifics of it, where they're headed in Minneapolis as far as getting rid of the police department and what have you. Wednesday, Michael Barone will be our Washington Examiner Wednesday guest, senior political analyst at the Washington Examiner. Looking forward to talking with Michael. So we've got a couple of great guests coming up Tuesday and Wednesday here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Do not miss a beat. My thanks to Cassie Smedile for joining us today here on the program, and to Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, as well as the Washington Examiner, our partners here on the program, and you for watching, listening, and sharing our programs. Please do share the videos, post them around, get them all over the place, like and subscribe to the channel. And JimmyAtTheCrossroads.com. Join the Crossroads Club and check out the really cool shop. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Have a great day. God bless America.